Welcome to Aurora Connects. This is season 4, episode 3 for Friday, October 22nd, 2021, Staging Intimacy. I am, as always, Aurora Theater's Associate Artistic Director, Dawn Monique Williams, and I am joined by Artistic Director, Josh Costello. Hey, Josh.
Hey, Scott. Josh Costello, hello.
It was some weird Costello Josh mashup.
I see. Oh, well, hello, Dawn. It's nice to be back on Aurora Connects with you.
Oh my goodness! This once a month we were just commenting. It's a different feeling. That muscle memory is a little bit different when we're just doing it once a month.
Mm-hmm.
So as always, friends, we love it when you comment along when you're with us. On Facebook, YouTube, if you're watching the Twitch TV, monitoring all the chats. So feel free at any time to drop a comment or a question for Josh or I or our guest. And of course, you can email us anytime at connects@auroratheater.org. That's connects@auroratheater.org.
Yeah, and we have a lot going on at Aurora Theater Company right now. We are gearing up for our first in-person production after the pandemic. Not that the pandemic is over, but after the shutdown. We are in rehearsal right now. In fact, right on the other side of that wall, there is a rehearsal happening for Father-Daughter by Kate Kerrigan. And it's going to be a fantastic show and just such a lovely way to welcome people back into our space. So if you do not already have tickets, I strongly urge you to go to auroratheater.org and read more about the play. You can also read more about the rest of the plays in this, our 30th season. And if you like, you can become a subscriber. But single tickets and subscriptions are on sale now on our website. And while you're there, if you are so inclined, you can also click the donate button at the top right and make a donation to help us get back onto our feet and help us welcome you back into our theater.
Thanks, Josh. Before we welcome our guests, I'm going to play a little video where's my language today? Snippet, clip, or a snippet, a clip it, from The Children, which is the last show that we did live in our building. So how apropos to be gearing up to go back live, bookending it with these 2 shows. And our guest today, Natalie Greene, also worked on The Children as both movement choreographer and intimacy choreographer. So I'm just gonna roll that clip.
I just ran outside in my apron and I saw the road cracked down the middle. And then I saw the wave. Only it didn't look like a wave. It looked like the sea was boiling milk. We built a nuclear reactor next to the sea. I realize now that part of my coming, part of my desire, was to kill her.
At certain times, people say you can walk on the beach and hear the church bells ringing from under the sea.
There was a radiation spike. We're going to need scientists, engineers.
It's death rows. You understand that?
Wow. We were just saying that feels like 1,000,000 years ago. How amazing to be back in that space. Well, as you can see, Josh and I are now joined by our guest, Natalie Greene. Welcome, Natalie.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
We are so thrilled to be with us. And Josh, tell us a little bit about Natalie.
I will tell you a little bit about Natalie. Natalie, welcome. You are a multidisciplinary performing artist, and you're the artistic director of the award-winning devised theater ensemble Mugwumpen. Natalie's work for the company has been produced by Z-Space, Intersection for the Arts, San Francisco Airport, Children's Fairyland, and Pro Arts Gallery. As a choreographer and intimacy director, Natalie has worked with Cal Shakes, Portland Center Stage, Custom Made, Shotgun Players, Stanford University, and Aurora Theater Company. Yay! Her dance theater choreography has been seen at ODC Theater, Dance Mission Theater, California Academy of Sciences, Minnesota Street Project, San Francisco City Hall, and in flash mobs throughout San Francisco. That's exciting. So you keep pretty busy, huh?
Thank you. Yeah, I have been in San Francisco for 18 years, so it's been enough time to work all over the place.
Mm-hmm. And doing lots of interesting things with lots of different groups. So I know that you do lots of other things besides intimacy direction, but I want to start with that. That's the topic for today's episode. And I'd just like to start with, for someone who's never heard the term, right, who has no idea what an intimacy director is. You know, I think people have a good idea of what a fight choreographer does, right, for example. What does an intimacy director do?
Well, thank you for asking. I love talking about intimacy direction. So I'm so excited to nerd out with you all tonight. I will say, just to start with what you shared, like fight choreography, as you mentioned, people are more familiar with it. An audience is pretty sure when they go see a show, and if there's like a sword fight on stage, they're pretty sure that no one's going to get stabbed in real life, that maybe that scene will be highly choreographed so that the actors are safe, but also so that that staged violence is performed in such a way that it's believable for those characters and that it tells the correct story with the right energy for the moment and all of that. So that field of fight choreography existed for a long time. Violence on stage is no older or younger than intimacy on stage. But for a long time, it wasn't necessarily thought of as it was as important that an actor who is performing intimacy would similarly have intense choreography, where it's very prescribed so that all of the actors are really safe and feel very comfortable and confident with what they're doing. And likewise, that it can tell the story, whatever that intimate moment is. So intimacy direction has three main components. One is intimacy coordination or being a liaison. That might look like really close communication with the stage manager, so that an intimacy director is in rehearsal some of the time, and certainly once the performance is happening, it's not at every show. But the stage manager should know the details of what each intimate moment is supposed to be so that they can keep an eye on it and make sure nothing gets too long or too short or hands or body parts in the wrong places, but that the coordination with a stage management is key. And with the rest of the design team, how is it lit? How is it costumed? Particularly around showing any skin, and how does that work with, what the actors want and need in terms of their vulnerability, and what the playwright and the director want and need in terms of the vulnerability of the characters. So one of the three components is just being a coordinator or a liaison. On film, it's, between department heads. And in the theater, it's with the design team and with the technical theater staff. Then there's the choreography component, which, as you mentioned, I'm a choreographer. And so I love that work, really planning repeatable, specific choreography that tells the story. And then advocacy, which I think is what we're doing here tonight. I'm so happy to be invited to talk more about this field and to advocate for the use of intimacy directors wherever they might be appropriate.
That's great. Wow. What about, so can you give us an example of the kind of thing that would require, I mean, I'm assuming, a kiss on stage would require intimacy, or a simulated sex scene. Which we've, I have staged without the benefit of an intimacy director in the past. But what are some more examples of the kinds of things that might happen on stage where the work of an intimacy director is valuable?
You're absolutely on the right track. There's sort of the obvious intimate moments and the less obvious intimate moments. So if there's a scene of sexual interaction or a scene of sexual assault, of course, it's going to need an intimacy director. Smaller moments, such as kisses, different kinds of embracing on stage, But there's so many other kinds of intimacy. There's intimacy between family members, intimacy between people of different generations or people of different cultures. There are intimate moments with medical practitioners, so staging medical intimacy and all kinds of things that might involve a certain level of vulnerability, a certain level of nudity, a certain level of deep connection, where the energy between two actors and the touching between two actors can make or break a piece and really help tell a story, or really hinder the storytelling that wants to be told. So an intimacy director, we hope, can help with all of that.
I'm really curious, Natalie, how you found yourself in the role of intimacy director, what your sort of path was to that.
Thank you for asking. I realize now that I was doing intimacy direction before I knew it was a thing. And I think that that's something that many directors and choreographers can say, because again, staged intimacy is not new. However, this as a codified field is relatively new. So I taught for a long time at the University of San Francisco, where the Department of Performing Arts and Social Justice is always seeking to use the arts as a tool and a vehicle for social change. In the theater program, they tend to pick some tricky plays, some plays that really have provocative content and that really bring up a lot of social issues. So at USF, I was often brought in as a choreographer for the theater program. And several times I was invited to work on scenes that had sexual assault. And I think at that time, again, nobody knew what intimacy direction was, or it was being founded around that same time, but it wasn't a national movement yet. So I think the thought from the theater directors at that time was like, oh, Natalie's a choreographer and a theater person and a feminist. Maybe she can help with this. You know, they were just kind of like, can you please just do that part? And I was happy to. And I do remember a handful of times in rehearsal, just going, okay, I'm asking a college student to perform something that is deep and difficult. And we want the story to be told respectfully and authentically. And we don't want to ask her to draw on her lived experience to perform this role. So I was so grateful when I came across intimacy direction as a field and I started training and learned the pedagogy, because I can think back to doing it and just always taking my best guess, right? What are the choreographer skills? What are my sort of socially conscious feminist warrior skills, heart skills that I can bring to this? And my teacher skills to, you know, respect the young actors and give them all the support that they might need to do the work that we're asking them to do. So I was doing it for a little while. And then when I found out it was a thing, I was like, yes, I want to know this. I want to do this. I think I'll be good at this. Tell me more. And that's when I started training.
Yeah, you sort of started to get into this next question a little bit, which is what are some of the, I don't want to get too specific or detailed if you'd rather not, but I'm like, what are some of the harms that can happen in a rehearsal process or in the run of a show when an intimacy director has not been involved and things have not been handled as well as an intimacy director could handle them?
Thank you for asking. I think that there are both physical and energetic things that can go wrong in a process or in a performance. So one of the things we like to do is equip the whole team, director, stage manager, and actors with tools that will support an entire process. And so I'll just give a few examples. One thing we're doing right now in our process is talking about when to use the actor name versus the character name.
Oh, interesting.
So asking an actor, let's say the actor's name is Sarah, Sarah, is this, can I put my hand here? And not Sarah's playing Juliet, does Juliet want your hand there? No, that's not a question Juliet, the character, is going to answer. Sarah, the actor, is going to have this conversation about how her body will be used in this theatrical moment on stage, whether or not that's what the character might want. And so that tool of using actor names in certain moments in rehearsal, as opposed to character names, can help establish boundaries and distinctions, because something that the character might want in a moment in a show might actually be crossing a boundary for the actor. So we want to equip people with skills and tools and rehearsal practices that will help distinguish the character from the actor. And that can also just support a distinction energetically between actors who are asking to perform intimate moments, who are likely not having an intimate relationship in real life. But we can create the energy and the dynamics that we want to on stage without putting any extra pressure on the actors to generate that chemistry in some sort of a way. People often think about chemistry as like, oh, they have it or they don't. And forget that chemistry is a science. It is not magic. Chemistry has exact measurements and precise things that can be turned up and turned down. So we're not placing this expectation on actors. It's either you have this magical chemistry with each other or you don't, and it's never going to work. But an intimacy director can help cultivate the energy that might be necessary. I veered off, so I do want to go back to answer the question that you asked, which was, what is some of the harm that could take place? Sometimes when a run of a show is long, things might change and morph over time. And so one of the things that we'll do is give specific counts and lengths and positions so that once actors get settled into the run of a show, the stage manager actually knows that this intimate moment is supposed to last this long, not this long or that long, so that there's no accidental slipping into things that are beyond what was choreographed and decided upon. And that's just going to keep the actors safe and make sure that whatever the director and intimacy director approved for that moment on stage is what continues. And that's another example of how the stage manager is involved to make sure that the actors stay safe over time, that those intimate moments might be imbued with different kinds of energy at different times, but physically there's a specificity and we're going to stick to it so that hands are not going in inappropriate places or that you're not veering from the choreography.
Oh, great. I've done a bunch of intimacy training myself, but I've never, yes, in the before times, as Josh has, I've like given it a go because we're directors and we didn't know that there was like a different path. But since intimacy, choreography, and direction has sort of started blooming as a field, I've not, as in my role as director, undertaken to do it, but I've taken a lot of trainings. I would love if you could share why it's sort of important that the director not be doing this on their own by themselves without having an intimacy director in the room as part of the process.
Thanks, Dawn. I do think it's important to acknowledge that so many directors were taking on so much of this work for so long. And that, again, intimacy on stage is not new. So for a long time, the responsibility for creating and crafting and maintaining the intimate moments was on the director. And I think some of the benefits of separating these roles is because the director holds so much. And the director is responsible for so many different elements of the show that when the actors feel that they have, again, the liaison, someone that they can talk to specifically about things, it also allows different power dynamics. I think there could be a concern from actors if something changed and they're no longer comfortable with a certain moment of intimacy on stage. It might be really scary to bring that to a director who has crafted some vision or who is reckoning with some script, something that is written. And so the liaison part and the advocacy part of intimacy direction is to have it be a separate person who is skilled and capable of talking about this sensitive content and can really represent the needs and desires and boundaries of the actor in conversations that the actor doesn't then have to be a part of. And then the actor doesn't feel like, ooh, I might ruin that, or I don't know if I can ask for that change, or, you know, this nudity, I would feel more comfortable if it was handled in this way, or if it was lit in this way, or if I had certain shields for certain body parts. And when that can be a specialized person outside of the main director who's really holding everything, but the intimacy director can say, you know what, this is my job. I'm going to pay special attention to this. I have special skills for how to talk about this and represent these needs and interests as a member of the design team. It feels important. And it feels like that's a distinction that can give a lot more space for actors to feel safe and for directors to feel like they can outsource a few things and say, I kind of want it to be like this. How can you make that happen? And then the choreographic skills come in. Yeah, I could tell more details, but I think I might wait for now.
Yeah, no, I mean, when the first time I worked with an intimacy director on a show I directed was not that long ago. But one of the things that really impressed me and that sort of got me excited about this whole concept was exactly that combination of being really able to talk with the actors about what they will and will not consent to, right? Consent is such a big factor in the conversation, and can change, right? Just because you're okay with something one time doesn't mean you're going to be okay with it every time. And taking that off of the director, who, you know, may there's some photos of our past show. There's actually is good, but also that the intimacy director then can help work to fulfill the vision for the play in a way that works for what the actors are comfortable with. And so it's not a matter of like, either they do this or the show's ruined, right? It's you know, here's how to tell the story. And often the solution is even better than what the original idea was.
Yeah, and I think that just like anything, when you bring in an artist into the team and that artist has specific training and a specific eye towards representing their role, you know, the lighting designer is looking so closely at how everything is lit, and your costume designer is looking at all the details of that. When you have an intimacy director who's really looking not just at the intimate moments, I'm not at a run through, you know, asleep in the back row until there's that kiss and then I wake up. I'm actually tracking the whole piece and going, oh, it seems like, you know, we could turn it up here to prepare for that kiss. Or can they take a deep breath after that kiss before we transition into the next part of the scene? That specialized eye on that part of the storytelling can just make for deeper, richer storytelling.
That's great.
So true. Everything that you're saying right now. I'm directing a production of Dance Nation, and I'm doing it in a university setting under COVID protocols where the young people are masked. Talk about outsourcing. I get to be here with you all right now this evening because our intimacy choreographer is working. She's down there with them working, but I'm finding, like what you're saying about like breath, and you know that there's these little tools that she's using that actually aren't about touch at all. There's, you know, so I'm finding that she'll be like, yeah, you're gonna make eye contact with her elbow, and like all of a sudden it's like the scene is so charged in a way, using space and distance. And so it's so useful to have that partnership with somebody and not just relegating them to like, you just say kisses, you know, that like to really let them be fully integrated and say, if we started something in this beat, the payoff by the time we get to the kiss or the touch or the whatever it is would be so much greater. So I think that's so great. I was showing those pictures because Josh started talking about the show that he used an intimacy choreographer on. And so I wanted to pull up that exit strategy picture, but it also cycled through some other shows at Aurora that have relied on an intimacy choreographer. And one of those was The Children. And we opened with a clip from The Children. And would love to hear you share with our viewers a little bit about that process where you were kind of in that dual position of sort of movement overall and bringing it down to the things that may have been intimate moments.
Well, I loved working on the children, partly just because I love being in the room with Barbara Damashek, and I learned so much from her every time.
We all. We love Barbara.
One of the fascinating things about that production was that it's a text-heavy show. There wasn't a huge amount of intimacy or movement, but we were able to really talk about what are the ways the bodies can help tell the story. How can we use the space in a way that every seat in the house, this is an interesting thing for a choreographer at the Aurora, is okay, every single seat in the house wants a really good show. So I sat in every different seat during different runs so that I could see if the intimate moments and the movement moments in the show worked just as well from any direction or any place the audience might be sitting. I think that there was so much past intimacy referred to in the children that some of the show was about an intimate relationship that had happened many years before that was a constant presence. And so it was just interesting to track how could the past intimacy impact the current relationships and dynamics on stage. And speaking of breath, you just mentioned, Dawn, this idea that breath can be a really significant part of intimacy choreography. A really well-timed inhale or a really well-timed exhale doesn't have to be written in the script. It doesn't have to be an expansive moment, but it can be really significant in terms of, turning up the pressure or alleviating and letting off some pressure. And that was something we used in the children. There was something interesting in the children about who initiates the kiss. Which of these characters should be the first person to lean in for it? And how long does the other person resist before they give in to it? And that was something we worked a lot on to make sure that even though there wasn't a lot of intimacy, that one particular moment was so important that we worked on it a lot just to determine who initiates, who holds back for how long, when are they both characters consensually in that kiss, who breaks apart from that kiss, and what story is all of that telling? And then one more thing about the children, we just had a really fun dance party moment. And I have to say, I am listed as the choreographer, but it was so great collaborating with Barbara Damashek on that because she knew what moves she wanted in there. And I just helped put them in the right order. And then we had some great dance parties where all of the actors contributed some signature movements or dance moves that they thought their character would perform. And then I put them in an order and staged them in a way that, again, all the audience members could enjoy and appreciate the dance party. Since a lot of the show, the tension was high, it felt like the dance party moment we had in there was one of the few times that all three characters were really on the same page. They were referencing a dance they had done in the past, but they were doing it in the present with their bodies at that time. So again, the conversation with the past and the present, and how the past was reflected in the storytelling that the bodies were doing in that present time. It was really fascinating and really fun.
Yeah, another thing with the children, just in terms of intimacy not always having to be about sexual things, yeah? Mm-hmm. There's a character who has a medical illness and she's lost her hair and we see that reveal. And I imagine for an actor that is also can be a very intimate moment of, showing that you've lost your hair. So that was just something else that came to mind in terms of the depth of this intimacy work.
And it's something I often do as a choreographer, is I always kind of just offer myself as someone who can help with physical things on stage. So that it often includes props or costumes and transitions of like, well, yes, that wig or hat is going to go away. and the bald head will be revealed. But what's the right way, what's the right direction for it to come off? And what's the right speed and tempo and timing? And how long do we wait before picking up the next line so that everyone can feel the weight of that moment? And then you've got this wig in your hand, and where do you put it? So it's all the storytelling stuff, but it's the intersection of that with the physical world, which again is often with props or costumes or set or other design elements. And again, I'm a nerd, so I love that stuff too.
Natalie, you're now working on Father-Daughter, which is our next production, and you're in rehearsals. The playwright is zooming in. It's a world premiere. And so the play is still being tweaked, and it's a story about two relationships, two romantic relationships, but also a father and a daughter, and the same two actors play two different pairs of lovers, right? And what are you working on with that show? What are you excited about? What are you what can you give us any examples of the kind of work that you're doing that we can expect to see when we come and see Father-Daughter?
I'm so excited about so many parts of the show. Partly the show is all about intimate relationships and how the intimate family dynamic between a father and a daughter can impact their romantic relationships that are beyond the father-daughter familial relationship. But how does the daughter impact the father's romantic relationships, especially if he's divorced and starting a new relationship but has a child? And because these relationships actually take place in two different time periods, so we're switching between time periods in the show, how does the relationship that the daughter has when she's first falling in love and it's her first serious relationship, how is that impacted by the relationship that she had with her father and by what she learned about the world through her relationship with him? So as far as I'm concerned, it's three intimate relationships that we're investigating. Although the show really, switches between the two romantic relationships, it's so often impacted by the father-daughter relationship. And so I'm loving working with these two incredible actors, partly because they are so skilled at not just at the text and the words and the characters, but at the physical storytelling, at how the characters move differently, how they embody each character differently. That's going to be a part of how the audience will orient itself to see this character walks or holds himself slightly differently than the other character they're playing, so that you can know, which time period you're in and which relationship you're watching. And that naturally impacts the intimacy, because the different characters have really different world views and ways of holding themselves back or diving in, ways that they are available and vulnerable, ways that they're closed off and shut down, and the ways that their partner might try to inch in there and say, "You seem a little closed off. How can I get in there?" So we're working with all of that. And I'm also just trying to equip the actors with tools that they can use when they come across things in rehearsal if I'm not there. So we're talking about consent and boundaries, and I'm just trying to equip them with a whole toolkit so that they can approach the intimacy that they're going to encounter in rehearsal every day. I'm only in rehearsal certain days, but I want them to feel really comfortable with how to advocate for themselves, and again, have a distinction between the actor and the characters that they're playing, so that they always know sort of who they're speaking from and who they're speaking about, and can represent the interests of themselves as an actor or of the characters that they're representing.
Now you, like with the children, are also the choreographer. And before we went live, you mentioned how so much of your work on Father-Daughter is also about the actual movement vocabulary of the piece. What can you share with us about that?
Well, first, that I'm very grateful to Kate Kerrigan for writing a play where movement tells a part of the story, and dance is a part of the script, not just as something that randomly happens at one fun moment, but actually key parts of the story are told through movement. And two of the characters met in a dance setting, and we're able to see them in that dance setting and see parts of their relationship play out through movement. So I had a great chat with Graham Smith, the director, a few days ago about how some of what we're doing in movement rehearsals with choreography is informing the actors in the rest of their rehearsal process, because they're discovering things about the character as we build these dances. And those things impact how their character works in other scenes and in other moments. So I'm just very grateful that there's a big opportunity for a choreographer in this show to be really involved and to be in direct conversation with the playwright, because it's a world premiere. So there's already more dance than there was a few weeks ago. It's getting bigger. And together we're discovering how dance can tell the story, and how the bodies inform the characters, how the characters inform the body movement, and what we can tell without using words, but through dance, and how all the other design elements are going to come together to support the dance and the physical storytelling.
So looking forward to seeing that. There it is, Father-Daughter by Kate Kerrigan, directed by M. Graham Smith, with wonderful actors, William Thomas Hodgson and Sam Jackson. William is making his Aurora debut with this show, and Sam was last seen in Exit Strategy in Splendor before that.
Sam was in The Bluest Eye.
The Bluest Eye, of course. Yes,
She was last heard
yeah.
in Aurora's production.
Yeah.
Bluest Eye.
Yeah, Sam's been, she's had a big presence at Aurora over the past couple of years. Yeah.
There's one part of the show that has been a huge challenge for me as an intimacy director, and I'm loving it because I've never done anything like this before. As we mentioned, the actors play the different characters and represent these different relationships. And there's an intimate moment that begins as two characters. It's right at the end of a scene. So a scene happens, a scene ends with a certain kind of intimacy. And the next scene begins with a different intimate moment with the different characters in a different time period. But we're staging it as one intimate moment. And so somehow in this intimacy, there's a little bit of change of scene, set, props, stuff on stage needs to change. The actors change time periods and characters and relationships, but it is one elongated moment of intimacy that is also a transition. And I've never had this challenge before, and I'm loving it. I don't know what it's going to turn out like, but I'm really enjoying it.
Is it going to be like a slow fade where they start out as one character and then as they're making out and what have you, they sort of slowly transition into the others? Or is it going to be like they're the first set of characters and then there's like a sudden switch and then they're the second set of characters?
I don't know yet. We're still working on it, but there will be a sheet involved. I think we might like go under the sheet.
They go under the sheet and come back out.
Come out as, but we're not sure yet. So I don't want to do too many spoilers because it might change 10 times before we get there. But I'll share that it's been a new challenge and a great opportunity for me to try something like that.
Oh, it sounds like such a thrilling moment, and I'm really excited to see what you all finally come up with. Yeah.
Hey, Dawn, do you have any moments from plays you've directed where you've had a particular challenge or had a particularly exciting bit of intimacy direction happening? Anything that springs to mind?
Well, I mean, right now with Dance Nation, there's some like self-touch is how the IC refers to it. I often say autoeroticism. We're supposed to delude the language, desexualize the language, but not only that it's a moment of self-touch, but that the character doing it is a 13-year-old girl. The actor is not a 13-year-old girl, probably a 20-year-old young woman. But that is sort of a sort of challenging thing given the context of the play. And also in Dance Nation, there's another young character that gets her period for the first time. and is sort of doing a mirror exploration with how to use a tampon. So yeah, we're up against a lot of moments right now with Dance Nation. We did Bull in a China Shop, where we had sort of a whole intimacy ballet that Maya was the intimacy choreographer on, and that was a lot of good fun. But, those were veteran actors who were sort of like, yeah, you can touch me anywhere, you can do whatever, it's fine, But it was still really important, even with those veteran actors, to have those conversations about boundaries, and especially in terms of garments, what their modesty wear would be, how modest their wear needed to be for them as individuals. So that was a really great collaboration with costumes and Maya and the two actors, Leontine and Stacy. We showed a picture of that, but yeah, always makes me a little squeamish. So I'm so glad that there's now a person who can be like a partner. I'll tell a secret with this Dance Nation, because the students have to perform in masks. There's this one moment where I wanted the masks to come off so I could talk through it with the intimacy choreographer, and then not be the teacher who comes in the room and is like, okay, young people, you're gonna take off these masks, even though we have this mask mandate, that I could talk through what my vision was with her, and then she could have a conversation with them, me gone from the space, about what people felt comfortable with. And then when I come back to see the moment, it was like a delicious surprise. So that was actually something that was really cool, where I don't want to say that I staged it by proxy, but it wasn't that it wasn't my vision. It's that I didn't have to power hoard in order for the vision to be achieved. So yeah, that was a great question, Josh.
I'm really glad you brought up power, because I think that that's something an intimacy director can specifically call out and cut through as needed, especially in educational institutions where students might have questions about their grades or about how a director or a teacher perceives them, not wanting to be perceived as a difficult person, so that they might get a good grade or be cast in the future. And I think it's a really important role that an intimacy professional can provide, is just somebody to cut through the power dynamics and ask questions that a student might not feel comfortable asking, but might need to be asked by someone who feels that they're in the position to do so without retribution.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's huge. I mean, I know as a director, even way back before this was a thing, and I was choreographing, nudity or kisses or what have you, as just in the process of directing a play. And I've always tried to be, making sure we're going slow and asking, is this okay? And all of that. But it, regardless of how, thoughtful and kind I can be about it, there is that power dynamic, and actors are, acting jobs are in short supply, and people know that they don't want to get a reputation for saying no. And so having that other person, yeah, that's a huge thing, not just in educational institutions, but in even in small theaters. Yeah,
absolutely. I want to make sure to mention a little bit of the history. Is that okay?
Yeah. We were going to ask you about that. We never got to it. Yeah, please.
Well, I feel I mentioned how I was doing intimacy direction before I knew it was a thing, and how relieved I was when I found out it was a thing and was able to start some training. So I just want to make sure that I share who I've studied with. And historically, many women across the country were doing intimacy direction or thinking critically about how intimacy could be properly handled in rehearsal processes and in performance. But Tanya Sina coined the term intimacy direction and wrote her master's thesis, and really is credited with initiating the movement through her organization, Intimacy Directors International, where I started my training. That organization really completed its mission, and many of the leaders of that organization are now working with another organization, Intimacy Directors and Choreographers. But there are several different organizations who offer training and who help not just people who want to be intimacy directors, but actors, stage managers, directors, all kinds of theater professionals who could benefit from learning how to facilitate conversations around consent and how that can intersect with and support a rehearsal process. And I also just want to mention that it's important to acknowledge that this movement is a part of a much larger movement for equitable practices in the theater. So as people have been asking big questions with our current social movements, we have Black Lives Matter and other movements that are saying, let's actually talk more critically about how we're treating people. And when we came to the Me Too moment, where people were a lot more vocal about their experiences of sexual assault and sexual misconduct, and that evolved into the Time's Up movement that is in Hollywood, but well beyond Hollywood, saying we're not going to tolerate certain behaviors anymore. I just wanted to contextualize that intimacy direction is one of the ways the theater field is responding to inequity and demanding better labor practices for our workers, alongside other movements in the theater, including We See You, White American Theater, and locally the Living Document, and other opportunities that theater artists have had to call out things that have been unjust and unfair, and to really ask for specific ways that the field can improve and rise to the occasion of this moment when we're really looking critically at how we treat people and how we can do better.
That's so great. Akin to that, I just want to shout out too that I've done some workshops with intimacy coordinators of color who are very deeply interested in this work as a site of equity and social justice. And then I've also done several workshops with theatrical intimacy education, including like some trauma-informed practices workshops. So I do think that this is a field that really, because it's all like exploding at the same time, has its finger really on the pulse of some best practices that we could all benefit from relative to care and consent, justice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm so glad you made that connection and brought up, the We See You White American Theater and all of that work. And I agree, it's all, in a way of a piece. And a lot of theaters are struggling with how can we do what we do. A lot of the processes that we have inherited and that we've built up over the years are not great for humans. And so this is one way that we can be better for humans. And, Aurora's made a series of commitments around racial justice, and we have not made a formal commitment that we will use intimacy directors, but we certainly are using intimacy directors any time that it might be appropriate. And I think it makes a real difference in the health and safety of our artists.
I want to shout out Aurora and your commitment, because I was recently reading in the Chronicle that there was a follow-up article to how Bay Area theaters have been responding to We See You White American Theater and the Living Document. And Aurora got a special shout out as a theater that has really affirmed a commitment and maintained a commitment to racial equity and other better labor practices. And I just want to commend you all. I'm so happy to be a part of this team.
Thank you. I mean, I of course, it's wonderful to see that, but we have a long way to go still. At Aurora, we are. This is not a moment of patting ourselves on the back. We're committed to the work, and we're really just getting started. Absolutely. We have a lot more work to do.
We all do.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of the work to do, we do have an advocacy organization for this week, St. James Infirmary. I have you up there with the slide, but I don't know if you were going to tell us about it, Natalie, or if Josh is going to talk about it.
I usually read off what's on there, but since you suggested this, I'd love to hear before I do that, what made you suggest this organization to us for this shout out?
Well, St. James Infirmary has long been a refuge for transgender and gender nonconforming people in the Bay Area, specifically for sexual health services, but there's many other things that they provide as an organization. And I'll just share quite personally that when I was a very young artist in the Bay Area, I was uninsured and I needed sexual health services. I wanted to go get tested. And I didn't have any money and I didn't know who would help me. And I went to St. James Infirmary, and not only did they provide really excellent medical care, but they also just helped me dispel any shame that I had as a 21-year-old brand new in town going to get tested. I felt that what they offered was well beyond medical care, and I was grateful to be embraced by that community. And it was a really special kind of welcome to San Francisco. And I really appreciate all the work that organization has done for a long period of time here.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Natalie. St. James Infirmary is an occupational health and safety clinic for sex workers of all genders, transgender and gender nonconforming people, and other impoverished or homeless communities. And you can find out more about them at stjamesinfirmary.org. And we encourage folks to check them out and maybe make a donation over there as well. Natalie, thank you so much. This has been a fascinating, wonderful conversation. And I'm so glad to spread the word about intimacy direction and help people understand this growing and really important field. Thank you so much for your work and for being on the show.
Yes,
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, just whetting the appetite even more for father-daughter, which opens in just a couple more short weeks.
That's right. So once again, that's a good time for me to mention that tickets for Father Daughter and the rest of our 30th season are on sale on our website at auroratheater.org, as well as subscriptions. And while you're there, you can donate to Aurora Theater and help us make this all happen. That is the donate button on the top right at auroratheater.org.
And again, thank you all so much for being with us in the chat and the comments. We love hearing from you. We're still planning our upcoming episodes, so you can send us a line anytime at connects@auroratheater.org. That's connects@auroratheater.org.
So next month, who are we going to have next month on Aurora Connects?
Next month, we're having my good, great friend, playwright and librettist, Kate Kerrigan, who is the author of our world premiere production of Father Daughter.
That will be great. She's fantastic. She was actually on the show way back in like one of our very first episodes.
Yes,
yeah.
Literally one of our very first episodes.
Yeah, so it'll be great to have her back on the show now that the show's actually happening at last. Long delayed.
Oh, yes, but we're bringing it to the people. So I'm super excited about it.
All right, well, thank you so much, Dawn.
Thank you. And thank you all for watching, and thanks for staying connected.